Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. Beck's here today to do a chill, try a chapter unhaul edition. I've done a few of these videos before and I find it's a really good way to give a book one last shot before you decide to get rid of it. And we're keeping it casual, one, because it's the weekend. I'm just gonna be wearing sweatshirts. I might do this over a couple days because it's a long weekend and my plans are basically to read, to watch Oscar-nominated movies, and also to shovel the driveway because it just keeps snowing and blowing around here. And it's also casual because I'm gonna be wearing my glasses, which I almost never do in videos because it usually reflects off of them. But I have to wear my glasses right now because I usually wear contacts, and I managed to inflame both of my corneas. So yeah, not great. Don't inflame your corneas. My tip to you. So I'm going to briefly mention each of the books that I'll be reading this weekend, and then there will be individual clips of me after I've read the first chapter of each telling you what I think and whether or not I'll probably keep it. The first book is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. This was a book that I picked up secondhand. I believe it was at Barnes & Noble. It was a long time ago. And this book sat at my parents' house for many years, so it actually hasn't been on my TBR here for that long. And I just want to give it another go because I feel like my reading tastes have changed a lot since I bought this book, but I'm still intrigued enough by it to give it a shot, so we'll see how this one turns out. Next is God is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens, How Religion Poisons Everything. This is a book that was given to me as a gift for my birthday when I was in high school from a friend, and I feel like I've browsed the pages a few times, like the first few pages, and just thought, maybe this is a little too deep for me. I'm not a religious person, so like the idea of this intrigues me, but at the same time, this might just not be something that I really want to sink my teeth into, so we'll find out. I'm also going to be giving The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin a shot. This is Or Why I Spent a Year Trying to Sing in the Morning, Clean My Closets, Fight Right, Read Aristotle, and Generally Have More Fun. This is a self-help book, which I never read. But my work colleague was getting rid of a bunch of books a couple of years ago, and this was one that I picked up because I had seen it around and I was thinking I would give it a try. So this is going to be me giving it a try. Fourth, I have The Birth of the Pill, How Four Crusaders Reinvented Sex and Launched a Revolution by Johnathan. I have attempted to read this book before. It was quite a few years ago now, and it just was not the right thing at that time. And I'm a little afraid that I just don't jive with the writing style of this, so I'm going to give it one more shot. Even though I'm very interested in this topic and I really like this cover, I just remember the writing style just felt weird to me, so I'm going to see if that's still the case now. I then have Lexicon by Max Berry. This is one that I picked up secondhand a number of years ago, and I read the first few pages at the time and thought it was intriguing, like the entire plot of it sounded intriguing. And then I was flipping through it more recently, just debating whether or not I wanted to pick it up, and I was seeing things on the pages that I didn't really like as much deeper into the book. So, like still towards the beginning, but deep enough into the book that I wouldn't have experienced it when I was first reading those few pages, deciding whether or not I wanted to buy it. So I'm gonna test it out again and see if this is really something I want to hold on to. Second to last, I have The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. This is a book that I'm also pretty sure I've had since high school that I got at Barnes & Noble, and this one also lived at my parents' house for many, many years, so it hasn't been on my TBR shelf nearly as long. The thing is, I always thought this was nonfiction, and then I was looking more thoroughly into it because I was gonna pick it up for a readathon, and I was reading the inside cover, and I realized that this is actually fiction, like based on actual things, but it's fiction, and this book then went on to influence legislation, but I think because it influenced legislation and everything, I thought it was a totally nonfiction account, and I'm just less interested in reading it now that it's fiction because there's, you know, probably going to be other things in there that I don't care about as much, so gonna see. Lastly, I have this chunker, which is The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. I picked this up quite a number of years ago now. One, because it had won the Man Booker Prize previously. This was before I realized that I don't really jive with those books as much, and also because I love the cover of this. I did try and read this a few years ago, and it didn't go very well. And then the TV show recently came out, so a lot of people were picking it up and reading it again, and generally I've heard very middling to not good at all. So I feel like maybe this isn't a book I want to commit to. I love how floppy it is, but I have a feeling it's just not something I'm actually going to be that interested in. So those are the 7 books that I'm going to be testing out over this weekend. If you're interested to see how I feel about all of these and what my final decision is, stick around. And just like that, the first chapter of the first book is complete. So I started with The Historian, and this is definitely intriguing. It feels intense. It opens like the author is a real person, and they have a little preface that says, well, it's actually a note to the reader saying, like, this is, you know, my history, and sort of like thanking different professors at these universities for helping her write this. And it's all supposed to seem like the author is writing this to you as though it's all true, and it's not, but it adds this authenticity to it that adds to the intensity and sort of this like underlying feeling of creepiness, like foreboding something bad is going to happen or something's just not right. And it opens with her at 16 going through her father's library. Her father's a diplomat and he's often away doing diplomatic things. And she's exploring his library and she finds this book with these letters in it, and she starts to read one of the letters, and it says, like, my dear and unfortunate successor. And she is very intrigued by this. And so in the first chapter, she gets up the nerve to ask her father, what does this mean? Why do you have this? And this book is going to have something to do with Dracula, but I don't know exactly how. I just know that that is going to be a thing because I could see Dracula being mentioned on the first page of the next chapter, and on the back of the book it does say, it says it's a vastly ingenious plot in which Dracula has developed a mysterious penchant for librarians. So I am interested in this, and I do like the writing style. It's a little fanciful, like a little overdone, but in a way that's giving me details that I do care about and want to read about. I just found myself really having to pay attention to what I was reading and had to read things sometimes a couple times to fully get everything that she was saying in here. But yeah, this is a good start, and I think I'm going to completely switch and go to something else now. Probably The Happiness Project. Book 2 for today, not so much of a hit. Not that I'm shocked. Like I said, I don't really read self-help books ever. The thing I will say about this book is it's very well organized, which is something I enjoy. When you get to the beginning of it, it shows you, like, it's broken down into months. You can't see that. So it's broken down into months, and each month has like a theme. So January is vitality, February is marriage, March is work, etc. Then when you get to that specific month, you can see that there's the bold font there, and that lists like the very specific things that she's going to talk about. So going to sleep earlier, exercising better, toss, restore, organize, etc. And then within each chapter, there's headers where she talks about each of those things. And it's clear that she did her research while she was getting into this and is bringing in those ideas. I was kind of jumping around because the intro is like 17 pages long, and it's just about how she came to get to this idea and sort of the research she did to set it up and decide what everything was going to be. And I just really didn't care that much. There's lots of helpful information in the back too if you're somebody that does enjoy this book and you want to start your own happiness project, just things to kind of guide you, quizzes and whatnot. So there's a lot of helpful information in here, but it's just not something I'm going to spend the time to read. No offense to Gretchen. I think this is very well put together and it would work really well for some people, but it's just not the kind of book that I want to spend hours putting effort into. I'd much rather read something else. All right, I picked up Lexicon next because I'm apparently alternating between fiction and nonfiction at this point. This one was a little bit better than I was expecting, which is nice. The opening chapter, you are just as lost as the main character. You don't know what's happening. He's in an airport bathroom. He's accosted by these two men and they're trying some sort of experimentation using his eyeball. It's very intense because you're in the same position as this main character who has no memory of, I think, something that has happened. Like, he thinks he's just this normal person, but I think it's clear that there's some past history here that we're going to uncover in this book. There are multiple people that die in the very first chapter, and it's all just, I could picture it as a film, basically. I could see it as the opening to a film or the opening to a TV show. I did come across that one line that I had seen more recently that made me a little worried that the book might be using words to describe things that I didn't care for, but it made more sense in the moment having read it in context of everything, and so I don't think that's going to be an issue going forward. It seems like the next chapter is going to focus on a different character called Emily. They're talking about Will, who was the character we were introduced to in the first chapter, and it's something to do with the power of words. This woman who was killed in the first chapter had some sort of power where she said some words and then she was able to get one of the bad guys to shoot himself. It does say words or weapons in the little eyeball on the cover, so there's some dark stuff going on here, but overall, pretty impressed. The last book that I tried out today was The Birth of the Pill, and I think this is a perfect example of the right book at the wrong time. When I originally read it, I just was not jiving with the writing style, wasn't feeling it, wasn't interested, put it down, but I didn't get rid of it, obviously, because I felt like there was still a chance, and I'm glad I didn't get rid of it because here we are a few years later, and I really enjoy reading the first chapter of this book. I would keep going with it. As you can probably surmise from the title and cover of this book, it's going to go in depth about the creation of the birth control pill. And the first chapter was very introductory, just kind of telling us who a couple players in the game were and sort of laying the backdrop of where American society was at that time, post-World War II, but still, you know, Christianity, 2,000 years of Christianity, a couple hundred years of American Puritanism, still weighing down on the idea of women having more sexual freedom. In my read of it this time, I really enjoyed the extra information that the author was peppering in there, and I would like to continue with it, so that's good. That's going to be the last book that I read for today, so I'll check in with you tomorrow about my last 3. Hello again. For you, it's been mere seconds, but for me, it's been many hours since I last sat down to talk about a book that I was reading. It's the next day, clearly. If anyone was curious, the Oscar-nominated movie that I watched last night was The Power of the Dog, and didn't love it. The first part was super boring. The second part was better, but overall, not my fave. But enough about that, because that's not the point of this video. The point is to talk about the next book that I tested out, and that was The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. This one I'm really not sure how I feel about. The first chapter, I didn't actually read all of it because it was a wedding scene, and we were introduced to our main character, Yorgos, and he's marrying Ona, who's 15. I know Yorgos is young, but Ona's 15. They're getting married in Chicago, and all of these people are there. It's like a big Lithuanian wedding, so there was a lot of names and just descriptions of the party. And so I read about half of that chapter and then jumped to the next chapter and started trying to read that to just see how I felt about it. And yeah, not the biggest fan. I feel like I understand where the book is going to go, and there is a part of me that wants to read it because I understand how important this book was, because it helped influence actual legislation. So there's a lot in here that is true and will be hard to read, but I don't know if I'm gonna want to put in the time to actually get through all of this. I did notice, it was kind of a random thing that I noticed, but there's really not a lot of dialogue in this. A lot of the pages, it's just like just solid text, and everything is being described to you in, you know, a fair amount of detail, but like it's really just blocks of text just describing everything that's happening and sort of describing how these characters are talking to each other without actually telling you exactly what they're saying, which is a choice. I mean, whatever. This book was published in 1906, so it is a classic. It's definitely an older style than I tend to read, but this is one where I'm gonna have to think about a little bit, but I'm leaning towards no, just because I don't think I would want to put in the time to actually get through all of this based on what I experienced in the first couple chapters. Second to last, God is Not Great. This is another one that I've had for a really long time, so the spine is a completely different shade of yellow from the cover now. But this one is interesting in the sense that I do want to continue reading it, but a small part of me knows that there are certain things he's going to say in here that I'm gonna be like turned off by, just not agree with, and not necessarily the religious argument parts, but just certain comments that he's going to make about things. There is that part of me that's a little worried about what I may find digging in here, but there were also some funny things that he said too. Like, he was self-deprecating at times, and I'm sure he will be again, because this was just the first chapter that I read, of course. In the beginning, he's talking about how when he was younger and he had a teacher who would teach them about the scripture and then also bring them outside and teach them about nature, and how he spent a lot of time studying the scripture because they would be given passages that they had to analyze, and he was really into reading that and doing well at it. And then eventually he kind of started to second guess things that people were saying to him related to scripture and the wider world. And at one point he said, "I was then nearing 13 and becoming quite the insufferable little intellectual." That made me chuckle. But then there was another moment where he mentioned that teacher and how she had since died, and how her grave, her unvisited grave, because she was a widow and didn't have any children. And I was kind of like, I get that that's true, that her grave is probably unvisited, but that's a little mean. Like, you don't need to say that. So I feel like that's kind of where those two halves are coming from. Besides the potential for funny moments and also mean moments, there's all the religious talk that's going to be covered in here. And in the first chapter, he was saying things that I do agree with. Like, he brought up the point that he doesn't need the idea of heaven and hell to have him be a good person. Like, I don't need the threat of hell or the promise of heaven to try and be a better person. And so that moment, I was really agreeing with him. And so I want to hear more about what he's going to say and see what other points he brings up, what other examples he brings forward. So I think I'm going to keep this one, despite the fact that there will be moments that I might not like as much. I have now read half of the first chapter of my final book, Luminaries. The first chapter in this book is 43 pages long, and these are really big pages, so I read about half, and I think I know how I feel on this one. The amount of text in here is just a lot. I mean, it's a thick book, she's floppy, it's fun to hold, but I feel like it's way too wordy for me. What I want to read is maybe about half of the page, and then the other half I wish had just been cut or just summarized a bit better. It's so detailed that I could not see myself sitting through 800 plus pages of that, even if I've been told it gets better after the first 300 pages. I'm not going to read an entire book basically to get to the more interesting part of still the same book. It's too much. The story is taking place in the mid-1800s, and our character Walter Moody has walked into a room where these 12 men have just been talking, and he's interrupted something, but he doesn't know that he's interrupted something, and he just wants to take a break and decompress from his long day and journey of getting to New Zealand because he wants to get rich off of the gold rush that's happening there. He sits down, and this guy next to him, who's one of the 12 people that was there having this secret discussion, starts talking to him. And that's basically as far as I got. He was also expressing like the history of where his family had come from, and this other character that he was talking to, we were getting some of his background. We were learning about the ship journey, and yeah, it was too much for 20 pages. It was in the sense that it was just so wordy, and it took so long to actually move just a slight inch forward in what was actually happening in the main plot. I did also learn that the author was 28 when she wrote this, so good on her, because that's very impressive. It's just not something that I'm going to commit my time to. I'm a little sad that I did buy this back in the day, but I was hopeful because, like I said, the cover is really cool and it was getting all this hype. And there's this zodiac element to it, but apparently it's not really like a huge part of it in the end. So I thought that might have been a cool extra add-on, but it sounds like based on what I'm seeing on Goodreads, it's not a huge thing. It's not big enough to push through the entire book for. So this one is going to be the first book going on my unhaul pile from this video. I'm also going to be getting rid of The Happiness Project, which shouldn't surprise you because I was pretty obvious about that and when I was talking about it. And then I do think I am going to get rid of The Jungle, unless somebody in the comments tells me that I'm making a huge mistake. I just don't think the style of this is going to be worth it for me, even though I do want to learn about certain aspects in this story. It's just, with all the other books I have on my shelves, it's just not going to be good enough. Those are the 3 books that I'm getting rid of, and that means I am keeping 4 of them. So I will be holding on to The Historian because this would be like a great book to read on a rainy, stormy night in the fall or the winter. Just it had some good vibes even just from that first chapter. I will be holding on to Lexicon because I feel like this could be a very fast, fun read with just sort of an interesting twist with the words being weapons. It's kind of a not wholly unique idea, but could be fun to read about. Birth of the Pill, this is the one that worked out really well for me because I thought I wasn't gonna like it because the last time I tried to pick it up, I was not vibing with it. Like the Luminaries, when I tried to read that, it was the same sort of feeling, but for Birth of the Pill, it was just that particular time. So I'm holding on to this one. And then of course, God is Not Great. This one, probably the iffiest of the 4 in terms of keeping it, but there is just a part of me that is still very drawn to reading this book. If you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, please let me know what you thought of them down below. As always, all of our links are in the down bar. You can go check those out if you feel so inclined. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you later.